So for the Dodgers, that's where I want to go next. This is a team that's a playoff team. They, quote, won the offseason by signing all of these players. It's a fun team to follow. They win the division just about every year over the past decade plus. There was one year where they didn't, and they barely missed to the Giants. So the problem at hand is pitching injuries. And JJ, I wanted to bring this up because Ken Rosenthal wrote about it yesterday after we saw Tyler Glasnow go down. It seemed like it was kind of nothing. We almost joked that maybe it was a Phantom IL situation because he was getting towards his career high innings in the major leagues. And he even spoke lightly of it. Then all of a sudden you hear, nope, it's going to take longer. Setback, elbow strain, essentially done for the year. So Andrew Friedman has been open about this lately. He runs baseball operations there. They need to do some soul searching with their pitching in the offseason. Do you agree? Do you think we've hit a point from a numbers perspective where data is showing Dodgers pitching injuries piling up more than most? There's some other teams high on that list, but more than most?
I would say for good and bad is kind of what they're chasing they're chasing high risk, which is the Dodgers want to have the hardest throwers with the best breaking balls, with the best ability to miss bats, right? Which those are logical things to chase. Those are logical things to go to. Ken noted in his story, we had a piece last year at Baseball America about how the Double-A Tulsa rotation was the hardest throwing rotation in baseball. And basically, if you look at that rotation, which was drawing raves, most of that rotation's hurt now. They're not the only team facing this. The Braves chase stuff, and the Braves have had a slew of arm injuries, especially if you look at players that they've drafted. I would say that these are teams who have been willing to take on more risk to try to basically win big. It's taking big swings on a pitching side to see how it works out. And some years you get what you got from the Braves got from Spencer Strider last year. And some years you get Spencer Strider missing the year like he is this year. Walker Buehler had already been hurt when the Dodgers drafted him. Walker Buehler has had a great run. Then he got hurt again, and he's struggling to get back to that. It's a tough balance because the Dodgers want to have aces, fronting the rotation in the postseason, pitching out of their pen in the postseason. And if everyone stays healthy, they can. But now this is the second year in a row. This is a year where, having run out of pitching last year, the Dodgers did everything in their power, it felt like, to try to go overboard on pitching depth this year. And here we are in mid-September, and we don't know what their rotation is going to look like come October.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to them for how well they've done in terms of identification on the pitching side. But the other part of the double-edged sword is there's so many of these guys that have been injured. But I mean, you look at their IL, and effectively they have more or less, two full rotations with Glasnow, Gonsolin, Kershaw, May, River Ryan, Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone, and Nick Frasso and Kyle Hurt, though I know the last two names I mentioned are probably more likely to be relief pitchers, but guys that did start at certain points in time. It's great that they're consistently targeting players that have big stuff and have this really high ceilings, but the ability to keep these guys healthy and get 150 innings out of these arms just has not happened. And I think that's concerning as someone who kind of grew up as a Dodgers fan and loosely sort of still follows the organization somewhat. It is the most frustrating thing every year going into October, knowing that you have this stacked lineup that's as good as any in the game. And you have just this, cornucopia almost of keeping it fall there of just hurt pitchers. And we didn't even bring up Shohei Ohtani, who could potentially factor into the mix next year. And I think that's the concern is from year to year, even though they have so much talent and they look so great on paper, I think the big question is how many of these guys are going to throw 150 innings? Do we have 5 or 6 starters here that can give us 130 innings even? Because I think when you get into, Glasnow and some of these guys, Buehler now coming back from, second Tommy John, et cetera, it's just very uncertain. And we just don't know if the stuff will ever fully come back for some of these players. And if they're ever going to be able to, consistently take the ball and go 5 to 6 innings 30 times a year. That is such a big differentiator between teams that do win titles and those that don't, is getting, a healthy starting rotation and having enough, average or better major league arms and a couple guys that are, ace caliber or number 2 caliber at the top of your rotation. And I think it's another concern going into the playoffs as we go into the last few weeks of the season once again for the Dodgers.
The other thing that I do want to kind of point out with this is there was a peer-reviewed scholarly study that looked at this recently. I'm planning to try to write on this more at Baseball America in the near future, that said, okay, we're going to look at major league pitchers and then try to see what are the differentiators between which guys go on the injured list the next year compared to this, and try to match them and all. And what they found is at the big league level, workload doesn't really play a part in this now. Like, we are at a point where there is no such thing as the overworked pitcher who goes on the IL. Almost, it's basically doesn't exist anymore. The two most obvious factors that led to further, increases in injury rates, increases in time on the IL, is fastball velocity and the power in which you threw your breaking ball, right? If you threw a hard fastball, but you threw a softer breaking ball, that lowered your risk. Well, the tough thing about this is when you said, okay, well, what's the Dodgers' common thread line here? They go for pitchers who throw hard and spin a nasty breaking ball. And I can't tell you that that's something where you're saying, okay, well, what we want to go doing going forward is find pitchers who throw not as hard and don't spin as nasty a breaking ball, because that's the guys you want to have. That's the guys who are most effective. But there is a durability risk that does come with that.
So what's the solution here? Because it's hard to say that they're failing. I mean, it's World Series or bust for a team like them. They've won one. That was during the COVID year. And actually, it applies quite a bit to this conversation because you didn't have a marathon season to get through. Part of the problem is, here we are. What does their rotation and their depth look like right now versus what it looked like in April? So what is the solution, last part here, JJ, for them? Do they need to start blending in some other goals in terms of who they are scouting and who they are developing to make sure that they counter it with some guys that are lower on the injury risk scale?
I think that they'll probably at least look at that, but at the same time, and again, I do think that there is potential of finding, hey, it's not like that there's only one way to get a hitter out. There are ways to, to mix pitches, to move pitches in and out, deception, all that. But all that being said, I do think that those are the guys I just described are usually not the guys. Those are the guys that you would describe as number 4 starters if you're talking about starting pitcher. Maybe a number 3. The Dodgers are looking for guys who confront a playoff rotation, be a number 2 in a playoff rotation. I think they'll go back to the drawing board, but I think also they're the Dodgers, so they may just say, you know what? Okay, next year we got to have 10 starting pitchers we can depend on, and we know that we'll have 4 of them at the end of the year. They can spin their way out of problems that most teams can't.